says, continued to take personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So this is really coming from that sense of people realizing that there's a problem with their behavior due to, in this case, the trauma of childhood trauma, neglect, abuse, alcoholism, whatever, and that traumatic, the impact of that traumatic experience in childhood creates survival behaviors to survive that time, when it feels like your world is crashing in because you're being neglected or abused. So you develop a survival behavior, which can often be taking responsibility for what's going on, for things which we have no responsibility for at all, like other people's behavior. So, but because these survival behaviors we develop later on in life, they get in the way of us living in a healthy manner. So, for instance, uncontrolled anger, that would be obvious. Or if you're always pleasing other people, never putting yourself first, that's another kind of behavior. There's a lot of them. So personnel inventory is what we're doing, which is not supporting our own wholeness, not valuing ourselves as a human being. And it could also be overvaluing ourselves as a human being as well, when we think we're more important than everything else. There's a balance to it. And in the 12-step tradition, that balance is really found through the perception of a higher power. Because from our own personal perspective, we have that habit of valuing ourselves too little or too much. So it's quite hard to move away from that unless we actually have something else which will help to lift us out of it. So if we imagine that our higher power values us and values everybody else, then we have a different perspective. And so we can just open ourselves up to that. So one of the steps in changing our own shortcomings is by making a list or personal inventory, as it's called here, of what our shortcomings are. And we've done a little bit of work on that. And then when we notice where we're coming up short, to admit it, to accept it, not to judge ourselves. Because when we come up short and we accept it, then we can act differently. If we don't accept when we're coming up short, when we're undervaluing or overvaluing ourselves, or so that's in the ACA tradition, step 10. In Tony A's 12 steps, which kind of came from the ACA tradition, but describe things a little bit differently sometimes. He says we continue to take personal inventory and to love and improve ourselves. So again, is to accept what we're doing in the present and admit it by loving and approving ourselves. So if we come up short, we can give ourselves love. we can value ourselves, we can appreciate ourselves. So instead of going in the condemnation method or the defensive method, which are reactions and they're more behaviors themselves. So, for instance, if we found we were being defensive and our response to that was to love and approve ourselves, then our need to be defensive reduces, because we're defensive because we've learned in the past to that we needed to be defensive because we're scared we're going to lose whatever security we feel that we have. And we may not even have that security. It could be a false security, believing something which isn't quite true. So that can leave us on shaky ground. So when we are feeling being defensive and we're not approving of ourselves being defensive, we're just approving of ourselves being present, being alive. So it's not approval of the behavior, it's not loving the behavior, it's loving ourselves. And this self is what we're introduced to in one place is in meditation, when we go to that place of quietness and silence, because our self in a way doesn't have so the self that I'm talking about is what is present when we notice everything else is changing. So our thoughts aren't ourself, our feelings aren't ourself, our sensations aren't ourself, our energy isn't ourself. All those things come and go and change and go up and down. And when we spend long enough noticing that in meditation, we also notice the one who is noticing. This is ourself. Because the one who is noticing doesn't change. We might have different opinions about this. Somebody might have the opinion that the self changes or the self doesn't change, but that's an opinion. When we actually notice ourself, our interior self, it's like you're sitting in the cinema and the screen is always there. And onto the screen is projected a film. So we see different colors and we hear different sounds. And we don't notice the screen any longer. We're noticing that the film, we're engaged with that. Our mind is enwrapped with that. And we don't notice the screen, which is the basis of reality. And it's what, yeah. And so it's an image of ourself, an element which is unchanging. So any opinion that we have, or any feelings that we have, when we let go of those opinions and feelings, our self becomes more available. We begin to notice it more easily. And this is the benefit of the unconditional calmness. This is the unconditional acceptance. because our self, this unchanging self, experiences everything without reacting because it isn't history. Our reactions coming from our education, our childhood, our adulthood, the people we've met, the things we've done, our reactions are all historically based. So to choose to do something which is new, and new need only be new in this moment, that takes a different description. It's not a reaction. Choose something new. Choose to be present in this moment is not a reaction. To choose to be present in this moment is an act of consciousness, an act of awareness. Whereas our reactions are not acts of awareness. And there's an overlap between the two because we don't just turn off one and turn on the other. It's, we're human beings, our reality is very complex. So you also have to draw some simple images and directions to guide us. But we shouldn't expect ourselves to just, click our fingers and simply be there. Well, maybe that's possible sometimes too. So we continue to take personal inventory, which is this awareness of ourselves and what we're doing, and to love and approve of ourselves because we're taking inventory. It's not due to the inventory itself, which we could judge as being good or bad, but it's the fact that we're looking at ourselves and we're accepting how we are in this moment, at this time. So I've described this then as taking responsibility. From a 12-step perspective, we've really been developing different tools up until this point. And at this stage, these different tools are really coming together. So we're taking responsibility for ourselves, and we're taking responsibility to respond, to consciously act in a manner which is loving and approving of ourselves when we are aware. So when we're not aware, well, if our behavior is quite supportive and we don't really notice it, that's fine. We don't need to do anything about that. Although even when we're loving ourselves, so I'll give you actually a more practical example. So one of the meditations that I teach is one that its source is rest. So it's really going into a state of rest within our body and expanding on that state of rest so we can feel it emotionally and mentally. We can feel it throughout our experience. And we've done this, I think, a few weeks ago, stepping into our behavior and then stepping from a place of rest and stepping back into the place of rest as well. So here, what they're describing is that we notice our behavior and we step into a place of approval and a place of loving, and we step back again. So we're in that place of approving of what we're doing, loving the fact that we are here doing this. We notice what it is where we're coming up short. And we continue to approve of ourselves because we're facing our reality. And facing our reality is the most difficult thing to do in life. some stage we would, I know for a long time, I would prefer to go to war than accept my experience at times. And interestingly, that's not so much loud experience, it's the quiet experience I found. So when we're in this state of resting or this state of loving and approving ourselves, we're in that resting meditation, and it's from here that we act. So this action is very different from a reaction, which tends to be judgmental, good or bad. So if what we notice about ourselves when we're in the state of rest, we're in a state of rest and we're healing just by resting, not even by doing anything, just resting. And we know that the deeper we rest, the deeper our healing process is. And we can use any moment to exercise this restful healing process. Not doing anything for a minute. You can just close your eyes, let go into a state of rest, and feel ourselves resting. And you get practiced at it, the sense of energy flow in the body changes very quickly, and we can just feel that and feel it and keep feeling. What happens inevitably as well is that the mind gets distracted and we're thinking about whatever, and we just bring it back to this appreciation of being alive in a way, isn't it? It's just resting, not doing anything, but just recognizing that this experience, this process of resting is healing. We're not really doing anything, we're just being alive. So we just repeat that. And there's no, what we're doing already is kind of, yeah, we're in that good and sort of happy healing state. But sometimes we're not. We're in a more difficult state, more maybe traumatic state, a heavier state, a state that we don't want to experience. And often we make ourselves busy with different things to avoid noticing some state of mind or emotion that we have going on inside. So we'll listen to something, we'll read something, we'll try and distract our minds from what we learn and what we experience when we're letting go. And as we let go, we're noticing things which we weren't aware of before. Some of those things might just be new things that we realize that we have this inner dimension in ourselves, which is actually free from the life in a way, free from history. It's not free from life, free from history. So we might just notice that, which is an amazing thing to notice, to let ourselves experience. And, if we have that, we can have that as our object of meditation, as they call it. We can have that as our focus of mind. And that's a really wonderful thing, really wonderful. So if there's things like that we can focus on, then yes, we should try to explore them. But it can be very difficult to do that, to have that sort of exploration if we're in a state of anxiety or anger, or we value ourselves so much, and that nothing that anybody does for us is good enough for us, or we don't value ourselves enough, and we never actually ask for what we need. So whatever state of mind it, which has a judgmental aspect to it, whatever judgmental state of mind or judgmental state of emotion that we have going on, there's going to be some turmoil with it. So it's a bit different. And so accepting ourselves with approval and love when we're in this turmoil can be a lot more difficult. I think it is. I think that's yeah, you know, if because what we're doing in this acceptance of ourselves, loving ourselves, it's a psychological and mental process. And if we have hell going on inside, then it's very hard to do that psychological process. It's difficult because there's so much other noise happening that it interferes with us all the time. So we do need to look at that because that happens too. Um, and it has the intensity in those moments that we have is very strong. So it's very hard to move from that intensity to this quieter place of appreciation and meditation. This is one reason why it is always advocated to practice meditation when you are well, when your state of mind is good and positive, or as good as it is at that time for today. And we take this time when our attitude is strong and positive. When we're already feeling relaxed and acceptance feels fine for us. We're already somewhat in that direction, yeah? And it's much easier to go further in it. But if we're really in a different direction, then that feels like quite a change. So and that's a very challenging moment. So we can accept it if we're aware of it as a very challenging moment. We still have the possibility of approving of ourselves because despite it being a very challenging moment, we're recognizing that. We're being aware of it. So if we practice approval when we're already in a state of relaxation and appreciation, that approval is easy to do, yeah, because we're already in that good state. And so when we practice it there, then we have the, I don't want to use the word trick, we have the tool, the inner tool, and it's much easier to apply when we're in that bad state of mind. That bad state, in that negative state, that state of anguish and turmoil. And we notice it. I'm in this state of anguish and turmoil. And I've noticed it. So I can approve of myself for actually noticing it. And so we're in a different direction. We've moved a little bit out of where we were. So this is the whole process of meditation and becoming self-aware. And when talking about self-aware, it's not just the awareness related to me, it's the awareness which relates to existence. Because I'm just part of existence. When we let go of all our history, if we ever have that experience of letting go of all of our history, all we are then is life. And that's a very free place. It's a very safe place to be. It's a very powerful place to be. But when there's no history, there's also no ego. So it's a really safe place to be.